To hear Emmy share with us what God has placed on your heart, and so I encourage you to be open to what God has for you in her message today. And yeah, she's going to tell us a little bit more about herself when she comes to preach. But yeah, Emmy, come on up. We're so excited to have you. Let's give her.
Thank you. Thanks. You're so awesome. Okay, hi guys. Thank you, Pastor Matt, thank you, Rachel, for this opportunity that you're giving me to be able to step into a practical application for my practicum. So for those who don't know me, my name is Emmy Hassenjager. I am a senior at Indiana Wesleyan University studying pastoral care and counseling and a psychology minor. I am from St. Louis, Missouri, so I'm a little bit away from home, but it's perfectly fun at IWU. So I graduate this April. I am planning to go to grad school back home in hopes to get my master's in social work so I can be a counselor in a psychiatric unit. So even though preaching isn't in my future, I still want to use this opportunity as an advantage to grow confidence in, speaking the word, telling the gospel to people, and just being more confident in being a leader in the church, as we're all called to do this. And so as Pastor Rachel was explaining why I'm kind of here, so for ministry majors, STM, the School of Theology Ministry, they kind of like to teach us all kind of how to preach at bare minimum. But when we get to homiletics 2, they like to give us more practical application so we can get more of a hands-on experience. So like I said, thank you, Pastor Matt, and thank you, Rachel, for giving me this opportunity. And so with that, I'm going to jump right into what I'm going to talk about today. And so my professor always tells us, try to utilize your resources with classes that you're taking to help you with sermons. And so when I was thinking about what I wanted to do, I was thinking about like all my pastoral counseling classes, my psychology classes, and I was just like, and thinking about what I want to do in the future, dealing with like grief or hardship. And so it kind of got me into this idea of how we are kind of promised peace on the beyond of our understanding. And so if you can, open your Bibles and turn to John 16. It's the 4th gospel in the New Testament, so I'll give you a minute to turn there. And if you may or can, please stand in honor of God's reading. Alrighty. Starting in verse 16. Jesus went on to say, "In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me." At this, some of his disciples said to one another, "What does he mean by saying this? In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me?" And because I'm going to the Father, they kept asking, "What does he mean in a little while? We don't understand what he is saying." Jesus saw that they wanted to ask him about this, so he said to them, "Are you asking one another what I meant when I said, 'In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me'? Very truly I tell you, you will weep and mourn while the world rejoices. You will grieve, but your grief will turn into joy. A woman giving birth to a child has pain because her time has come, but when her baby is born, she forgets the anguish because of her joy that a child is born to the world. So with you, now is the time of grief, but I will see you again, and you will rejoice, and no one will take away your joy. In that day, you will no longer ask me anything. Very truly, I tell you, my Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. Until now, you have not asked for anything in my name, and ask and you will receive, and your joy will be complete. Though I have been speaking figuratively, a time is coming when I will no longer use this kind of language, but will tell you plainly about my Father. In that day you will ask in my name. I am not saying that I will ask the Father on your behalf. No, the Father himself loves you because you have loved me and believe that I came from God. I came from the Father and entered the world. No, I am leaving the world and going back to the Father." Then Jesus' disciples said, "Now you are speaking clearly and without figures of speech. Now we can see that you know all things and that you do not even need to have anyone ask you questions. This makes us believe that you came from God." "Do you believe now?" Jesus replied. "A time is coming, and in fact has come, when you will be scattered, each to your own home. You will leave me all alone, yet I am not alone, for my Father is with me. I have told you these things so that you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Thanks be to God. Alrighty. So before I jump in immediately into this passage, I just want to give a tiny background of the whole Gospel of John. And so if you didn't know, John was a witness of Jesus. And in particular, John had a more understanding about the aspects of God's nature than kind of the others. And that John's gospel repeats, many stories the other gospel has, but specifically between chapters 14 to 17, John has kind of more specific accounts in these gospels. And so this kind of brings me to my first point of acknowledging the pain. So in this, it starts immediately off in a little while. And in the Old Testament, it kind of refers into an intense eschatological intervention, kind of meaning that it's relating to death, final judgment, that type of thing. And so it's kind of talking about this Greek word called thlipsis. Thlipsis kind of just means trouble, hardship, oppression, that kind of thing. And so this is where Jesus was referring to his own death and telling the disciples, you are going to mourn, you're going to be sad. The world is going to rejoice though, but you're going to be sad. And so to kind of apply this to regular life, when you in physical use like physical pain or whatever, you're going to acknowledge it and be like, oh my goodness, my knee hurts. You're going to recognize that and say that. And so you might use interventions like medicine or the doctor or, whatever that may need. But when you apply that in like a spiritual, emotional type of setting, people kind of hesitate with that. Why, you may ask? There could be people just don't know how to handle those types of emotions, or people just are afraid of what others might think if we go out to try to seek counsel. So it could be multiple different things. But with this, it's kind of weird, but it's like we kind of are promised hardship. It's in John 15:18, the just chapter prior, it says, if the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. So in this, it says Jesus is saying you may have peace. So he's kind of offering the peace. So we are not promised peace, we are promised hardship. And I know that's hard to understand, this, because it's like, if God loves me, why is he going to give me a hard time? And so, but if we can understand this, it kind of gets rid of this like false expectation or hope that God is going to just make us be comfortable all the time, because he cares more about our character than our comfort. And so this kind of leads me into our following point, that it's been overcome. Jesus overcame the hardship, the trouble. He overcame thlipsis. And so he did this through the cross. He conquered the grave through resurrection. He conquered the trouble. And so we're going to go through all these hardships, whether that's medical issues, toxic relationships, whatever that might be. And in verse 21, it talks about how a mother will give birth and that labor is going to be hard, but once the baby is born, it's like immediate relief. I'm personally not a mother, so I don't know that experience, but I've seen it happen, and it's just like immediate relief, and you're like, okay, cool. And so to give an application of what I personally go through, so as I said, I'm a senior at college, so I've gone through quite a few semesters at college, and every semester I go through the same pattern. I start the semester, I'm like, this is going to be great, I'm going to do fine, and then we start, going in the rhythm, and you're like, I don't know if I can do this, like, this is hard, like, I don't know. So then I start to procrastinate, and then I get worried because I'm going to start doing late things, but then somehow I finally make it to the end, and I pass, and I'm like, I look back, and I'm like, wow, why did I ever doubt myself? And so I look back and I go, I conquered that hard exam I thought I was going to fail. I conquered this book report I didn't want to do. I did it. So, with that being said, I would like to say, whatever happens to God happens to his disciples. We share this connection with God. And so, with this relationship, because Jesus conquered, we will conquer. So with this relationship between us and God, we're like best friends. But when you allow something to come in between that, like the world, for example, and our worldly desires, it can cause kind of a split. And, the world will say, oh, you're a bad Christian. No, you're not. We all go through these struggles. We're all going to walk through these steps after again and again and again because we're not perfect. We don't have this divinity that God has. We only share one thing with God, and that's that humanity. And so, one thing for me, I'm a firm believer in prayer. That is, we are blessed to have communication with God like that. And so when we are able to communicate with God through prayer, he's going to reveal whatever he wants to you, And so when you are going through these hardships, I might not recognize it right away, but I believe that the first step should be prayer, just admitting to God what happened. So that kind of talks about that first point. Acknowledge the pain. 2, it's been overcome. You're going to conquer that hardship. So just admitting it is that first step of conquering. And so you might be thinking, what does this mean, Emmy? Like, I kind of get what you're saying. And so there's going to be suffering in this world no matter what. We've been broken since day one. And so in Romans, I like to point out 2 verses. In chapter 8, verse 18, it says, I consider that our present sufferings are not worthy comparing with the glory that will be revealed to us. We're going to suffer as long as we're in this earth because it's so broken. But it's not going to compare when you get to heaven and you get to be with Jesus. Like, imagine that for a second. You're not going to be in pain. You're not going to be broken. You're going to be with Jesus. And I can't wait for that. It's so exciting. And the second one is verse 26, and it says, in the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit himself intercedes us through our wordless groans. So even if you don't know what to say, God still hears you in your heart and your mind. And I like to point that out a lot because sometimes when you're just in that dark, broken space and you don't know what to say, God is still there and sees you and hears your words inside. And so this kind of leads to my next point. Therefore, we should have joy. So you might find joy in different things. If you're a parent, your kids are your pride and joy. I don't have kids, so I don't know that. Or if you like sports, you might find joy in your favorite team. For me, I love my St. Louis Cardinals. Can't wait for baseball. Thank you. Thank you. Or relationships or hobbies, whatever you find joy in, go ahead and think about that for a second. And you might be, smiling thinking about it. Now, let's see if we can kind of twist that joy and our concept of joy and apply it to God. You might be thinking, I don't know. In this situation, Jesus was telling them, you're going to mourn, you're going to be sad, but I'm coming back. So he's giving this sense of peace. And they're not understanding until they realize that he's coming back. And it's a joyful thing that they're thinking about. This joy should be comforting. It's going to be blessed. It's, anything you can think of, that's all happy. And so going back to when I was talking about prayers, our prayers should be directed through God because every blessing that we are getting is purchased through the death of the cross. And we should have this humble confidence when we are asking for blessings because it literally says, ask and you will receive, and your joy will be complete.
Yes, come on. That's right.
Jesus was warning what was to come. And he was saying, I need to leave so I can come back, but they weren't understanding. And so Jesus died on the cross for us. So our grief will turn to joy. So he literally says, your grief will be present. The world rejoices. We will realize what's going on, and then we're going to have this joy. And so to kind of rewind, remember, we first talked about acknowledging the pain. So when you're acknowledging the pain, you're just pinpointing it. And that's the first step of overcoming it, the conquering. And eventually you'll go through this process and look back and go, look what I did. Look what I went through. And it's a joyous process. We've all been through it before, one way or another. You might not recognize it, but you did. You went through some sort of hardship, somehow took those steps to get through it, and you look back and go, I did it. I made it through. Because Jesus conquered, so we conquer. So I have a couple of reflection questions I want you to think about. The first one is, what is holding you back from accepting this peace that Jesus is offering? So like what grief or struggle that you are currently dealing with, why is it holding you back from going to Jesus and accepting this peace that he's offering? And so that second question I have, that's not up there because I changed it, I'm sorry, but is what is something that you are not acknowledging in that hardship? And so with this, we're going to move into a response time. So I'm going to ask the worship band to come back up and play a song for us. And while they're playing a song, feel free to come up. The altars are open. You can come here and pray to Jesus and just acknowledge that pain or pinpoint or ask, what can we do? We're going to have people up here to pray if you just need someone to be prayed over you. Or you can just sit and worship and just reflect over this pain. So I'm going to pray real quick before we do this. So bow your heads with me, please. Dear King Jesus, thank you for what you did. Thank you for going and dying on the cross so that we can share that victory with you. King Jesus, I thank you for just walking along the side of us, even though when we don't see it, we don't feel your workingness, but you are there. King Jesus, thank you for giving us this promise that is beyond our understanding, Lord. And I pray as we step into this time to reflect that you just let these individuals acknowledge their pain, that whatever it is, or allow them to take that first step, whatever it is coming out of that hardship, or if they've just calmed through something, Lord, just give them that joy and let them praise you for what you did with them. Lord Jesus, we thank you and we love you.